sing a song for every bomb that flies. I'd sing each and all the days. If there were to be a verse for every dying child's cries, for every helpless father's gaze. If I could write a love letter for each corpse as it's carried, I'd never still my pen.
Bringing peace and social justice issues into your living room, I'm Pat Miner, the host of Piece by Piece. It's been a while since we've been here, and we're going to tape a new show, and we're just going to catch you up on some of the things that have been happening in the Middle East. Many of you have heard about the atrocities that happened in Gaza, and the new initiative that the Obama administration has initiated against what he's calling ISIS or ISIL. And we'll be talking about that. But first I want to introduce you to my guests, Yaser AbuDagga and Mohammed Hasan. And they'll tell you a little bit about who they are and where they came from and what they're doing here.
Thank you, Pat, for the introduction. My name is Yaser AbuDagga. I am a Palestinian American. I'm originally from Gaza Strip. I live in Corrival, and I'm an engineer here locally. I've been in the United States for more than 25 years, and I'm a citizen of the U.S., and I participate in the political system. And I'm concerned about a wide range of issues, social issues, including what's going on in the Middle East and the economic situation and how that is affected by the conflict in the Middle East. Appreciate having me on your show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you, Pat. My name is Mohammed Hasan. I'm married with 2 kids. I work as an engineer in Iowa City. I have a small engineering firm here in Iowa City. Like Yaser said, we're both Palestinian Americans. We are concerned with what's going on in the Middle East, and we would like our U.S. government to be more influential and more positive when dealing with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
So you're both naturalized citizens, though, now, right?
That's
and
right.
concerned with the political process. You vote. You speak to
We caucused for Obama.
Yeah, caucus for Obama. I don't know about you.
I did, and I voted for Obama in the last 2 elections as well. I'm a registered Democrat.
Yeah.
But we'll wait and see how the Democratic Party is drawing their politics, especially when it comes to Middle East and social issues.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear you say that you're interested in the Middle East, but also a wide range of other issues. So, like poverty, the difference between the level of
the gap.
Yeah, the gap between the rich and the poor.
Exactly.
About jobs security, about food security. I'm sure that you're interested in all of those things as well. And that's, many of us are in that same route. Well, let's talk a little bit about what is going on. I don't remember the dates, but Israel launched another devastating attack on the Gaza Strip this summer. You might remember the exact dates.
Yeah, it began the beginning of July and ended almost the end of August. It's 52 days of continuous bombing of the Gaza Strip. And just to kind of give you a background on what's Gaza Strip before we get into the details of the aggression, Gaza Strip is a strip of land that is bordered by Israel from the north, east and south, and then from the west it's bordered by the Mediterranean and Egypt, and it's about about 25 miles long and 7 miles wide at the widest, and it has 1.8 million Palestinians live in that strip of land. 80% of them are refugees that were kicked out of their homes when Israel was created because they didn't belong to the right religion or ethnic group. So just to give you a feel of how it feels in Gaza Strip, it feels really crowded. It's one of the most populated strip of land in the world. You have homes that are occupied by I would say hundreds of people, that they're like apartment buildings, because of the short or the limited amount of land available for people to live in. So just to have that highly populated area bombed from the sea, from the air, from land, continuously for 52 days, that gives you the feeling of how terrifying the situation is in Gaza Strip.
Right, and in addition to that, there's been a siege on the country since 2007?
2006, I think.
2006.
It's been 8 years.
Yeah.
Since the voters voted in a free election for Hamas. And since then, the Israelis put a siege on Gaza for 8 years.
Right. That's the one thing I think a lot of listeners may not understand, is that what's happening in the Gaza Strip began in 2006 when they had free and fair elections and monitored by the Carter Center,
Yes.
which, as I recall, said that, and other international observers, and as I recall, the Carter Center said it was one of the freest and fairest elections they had ever seen. And Hamas was elected primarily because they felt Fatah was, the people felt that Fatah was corrupt and was not giving the money to them. Is that correct?
And
spending money on them?
Yeah, that's one of the reason, but I think it's the most important reason for the people that they voted Hamas, and is the fact that the negotiation that the Fatah was elected based on with the Israelis did not take him anywhere, and actually made the situation worse. For 20 years, Fatah and the PA was negotiating with Israel, and they still are. And what did the Palestinians get in return for those peace talks is more land confiscation in the West Bank, more home demolition, more of their farms and trees get destroyed, more of their livelihood destroyed, more restriction in the movement of the people, more restriction of the trade with the outside world. It just felt like a prison. Not only in Gaza, in the West Bank. You know about the apartheid wall that the Israelis are building in the West Bank. You have cities, complete cities, encircled with a wall with a door for anybody to leave and get in. Imagine that you have a city the size of Cedar Rapids with 300,000 people that had like Kalkilia, that it had a wall, a 8-meter or 30-foot wall that is encircle it, and you are only allowed to leave with a permit from one gate in that city. So the Palestinian looked and said, this negotiation is just getting us more destruction, and it's getting us more occupation instead of giving us our rights. And that's why they just declared that they're done with the negotiation, and there should be other measures to bring an end to the occupation.
Yeah, and so they primarily, what you're saying is they primarily voted Hamas in, not because of their violence, not because they wanted to fight against Israel, but because they felt Fatah wasn't really negotiating their peace. And so the people voted Hamas in, and as soon as they won, the United States and Israel decided they didn't like the way it ended, So they funded Fatah and declared Hamas a terrorist organization. And so there was a fight among the Palestinians themselves. Well, not the Palestinian people, but the armed factions of the government and the Palestinian and the Hamas organization. And then what happened was Hamas went into Gaza and took over Gaza. And now, ever since 2006, they have been in Gaza and ruling Gaza, and Fatah has been ruling the West Bank.
Yes.
And this is exactly, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that this is exactly what Israel and the United States wanted. They wanted to divide the Palestinian people, and they have been saying forever that they can't negotiate with the PA because they don't speak for all of the people. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was that because they considered Hamas a terrorist organization, they put a siege on that tiny strip, as you say. It's a very tiny strip of land, and with 1.8 million people?
1.8 million.
1.8 million people, almost 2 million people, at least half of whom are children. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's just an amazing thing to me. And they put a siege on them, in the hope that the people would rise up against Hamas, I guess? I mean, can you get into the mind of the Americans?
That's probably one of their objectives, but I heard they rationed the amount of calories per person going into Gaza, right? Mm-hmm. Yaser? And
and that's a clear policy. It's not something that I and you are saying, because that's what the spokesman for the Israeli government, when the siege was put in place, is the objective of the siege is to put the Palestinian on a diet in the Gaza Strip, so they count the calories and make sure that they have enough not to be starved, but not enough to be well fed.
Yeah.
So and just to be clear here, the objective of the siege is not to overthrow the Hamas. Actually, the Israeli government is benefiting from the Hamas being ruling the Gaza Strip and the divide in the Palestinian. In my mind, it's very clear that the Israelis, what they're trying to do with the siege and the blockade of Gaza Strip is to subjugate the Palestinians to a really tough situation, so they will make sure that they don't resist occupation, don't resist the apartheid system of the current Israeli government, and they just accept of the status quo. I'm clear, and I have no doubt in my mind, if Israel wanted to go in and topple Hamas and get rid of Hamas, they will do that. They have the fourth largest army, the biggest army in the Middle East, and with an organization that does not have any structure, any backing from any Western government or from any government at all, and they don't have the infrastructure, and they don't have the air power and the sophisticated arms that Israeli has. I wouldn't doubt at all that Israel can and have the power to do so, but it's the Israelis wanted the status quo to continue. And then, as you said, the Israelis, when there was a divide between the Gaza and the West Bank, they said, we can't negotiate with Abbas because he does not have control over the Palestinian territories. But then when the
unity government was announced, they, I think, see, the main objective, or the Israeli objective, is to keep Palestinians divided. They don't want to see Palestinians united. That's their long-term policy. They want to keep the West Bank divided from the Gaza Strip, and they want Hamas controlling Gaza and Fatah controlling West Bank. But when the Palestinians in the West Bank, they got fed up with the Oslo failure, the Oslo Accord failure, and with the continuous building of settlements, confiscating land and demolishing homes and killing civilians. I guess Abbas and the Palestinian Authority realized that the only way is to unite or form a unity government. And once they did that, I think Netanyahu's government, which is a right-wing government, decided to, they came up with the story of the three Israeli settlers.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in just a moment, but let's just, so people understand the conditions in Gaza before this summer was that there was a siege on this tiny little island, basically, which many people call an open-air prison, because Israel has, as you pointed out, Israel has control of 3 borders, and Egypt has another part, and Egypt is complicit with the Israeli government in stopping anything goods coming in and out. And another thing I wanted to point out is that in addition to food being minimal, another thing that happened was after the last siege, they wouldn't let building materials come in either. And so many people are living, in bombed out buildings, and they had recently, the power plant was bombed as well. So there was raw sewage in the streets because there was no power plant. They maybe had electricity, 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day was all. So, obviously they had a problem there. There were no jobs because there was nothing coming in and going out, so no one had anything to do. And in response to these things, and here's another thing, is that Hamas had maintained the figure that sticks in my mind, and I don't know if this is correct, but the only defense that they've had throughout this whole thing is rockets going into Israel, right? And just to be clear about what these rockets are, they're basically glorified fireworks. Is that not correct? Yeah, they're basically glorified fireworks, and they had a continuous ceasefire, had not sent any rockets in, and there may have been occasional rockets by other armed factions in the group, but Hamas had maintained a ceasefire for 19 months, is that correct?
That's correct.
Before this summer. 19 months, almost 2 years before this, and they just got fed up with the situation. So they started firing rockets. And then there were 2, let's talk about the 2 Palestinian youth that were killed in the West Bank as a result of, I don't know what. The
teenager from Jerusalem.
Yep.
He was murdered in a very ugly way, in which the settlers kidnapped that child who's only a teenager. He's only 15 or 16 years old.
This is before that, though. There were 2 Israeli soldiers, and I think as a result of, there were some demonstrations. There have been continuous nonviolent demonstrations against the wall, against the apartheid wall, against all kinds of other things at checkpoints and things like that throughout this.
And you're bringing a good point here, Pat, is that the Israelis are, the Israeli government, I would say that they are, their excuse of bombing Gaza is the rocket, but then, and killing Palestinian, even civilian and children as young as 2 days old. But when you look at the West Bank, there is no rockets, no tunnels, and the Israelis continue to kill unarmed civilian teenager kids in the West Bank, and it's just a question here: why are those being continually killed. And the answer, there's only one answer, is to continue the domination of the Palestinians and continue the occupation. When you look at the just a couple of days ago, they announced confiscation of 1,000 acres of Palestinian land to build more Jewish-only settlements. So that make it clear, and I don't know how people are not seeing that, is the issue here is not Israeli security, it is about colonization of the Palestinian land.
Right.
So it is mind-boggling that we hear our government here saying that the Palestinians have to guarantee the Israeli, which they are the occupiers, guarantee their security. How about the security of the Palestinians? How about the rights of the Palestinians? It's just the Israelis cannot continue, the Israeli government cannot continue occupying the Palestinian land, enforce a racist system on the Palestinian with Israeli-only roads, Israeli-only settlements on Palestinian land, and then they ask that the Palestinian guarantee the security of the settlers, that they live on stolen land.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the settlements?
Well, I go to Palestine to visit every 2-3 years, and every time I go back to visit, I see more and more settlements, more and more land being confiscated to build more settlements. And like Yaser said, they just announced a week ago confiscating 1,000 acres to build more settlements. And soon, do you know what the percentage of the land that's been taken to build settlements in the West Bank? Maybe 30% probably, or even higher. And it's just it's killing all hope of having a two-state solution. It's almost dead. With all the settlement taking all this land, there's no hope of having a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
So it's a tragedy, and that's why you see in the West Bank, people in the street, they're fed up with this. There was talk of a third intifada, but and then the attention shifted to Gaza after the aggression on Gaza. But
I think that to take attention away from that. But as you mentioned, that Israeli settlements are built mostly on top of hills, so that they have strategic advantage, and they take water.
They take
land,
most of the water resources.
They destroy, to build these settlements, they destroy farmland of the Palestinians, and they set up checkpoints so that Palestinians don't have freedom of movement within their own land. And these are the conditions that were going on in the West Bank. And at the beginning, the place I see, these are the conditions that were going on in Gaza and the West Bank at the beginning of the summer. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of, there's daily, or just about daily, certainly weekly, protests, nonviolent protests against these situations happening in the West Bank. And there were two teenagers who were, and the video, the reason I can say this with such authority is because there was a video taken of two teenagers who were shot by, at different times. I think it was the same area, though. They were like within blocks of each other. And a video surfaced, CNN. It was shot by a CNN producer.
Absolutely.
So, and they showed it, and an Israeli soldier shot a Palestinian teenager in the back as he was walking away, unarmed. I mean, they're not armed. They don't have guns. It's the settler kids who have guns in the West Bank. And he walked away and he shot him in the back, and he was killed almost instantly. And then a few hours later, in the same area, a second Palestinian teenager was also shot. And it is that experience that I think started this latest round of violence all the way over. And I don't know if it was in response to that, but there was a kidnapping of 3 Israeli teenagers. And immediately the Israeli government announced that Hamas had done it. And it's my understanding that they knew right away that the teenagers had been murdered. And evidently there was a phone call one of the teenagers was able to make, and they heard the gunshots. And yet they did not release that audio recording until much later, and they didn't tell the parents, and so they assumed that this is the Israeli government. I mean, when I say they in this particular case, they gave this very little information. They stirred up sentiment against Palestinians because they claimed Hamas had done it. And then they claimed these kids were still alive and that they wanted to get them free. So they used that as an excuse to go into the West Bank and Gaza and start arresting Palestinians, many of whom had just been released through an agreement with the United States wanted them to release Palestinians in good faith. So they rearrested all of these people. In the meantime, rockets are being lobbed from Gaza because they'd reached the end of the road. I guess what we didn't mention was that during this, just the preceding period, there had been another round of peace talks going on, which eventually failed, as always. And I don't know if we want to go into, does anybody want to say anything particular about those peace talks?
We got used to hearing about these peace talks that go nowhere for the past 20 years since the Oslo Accord. But I mean, in all honesty, none of the Palestinian people believe that these talks will get us any of the land back or get us any of our rights back. And that's why people believe that resisting occupation is probably the best choice now in fighting the occupation.
Yeah. And how about Gazans? Do they believe the peace talks are going to get us anywhere?
Well, and that's what I said from the beginning is that the Palestinian in Gaza and Palestinian in general, they wanted a shift from the talks into actual resistance of occupation. And when I say resistance of occupation, that not necessarily mean violent resistance, and actually most of the Palestinian resistance is non-violent. Right. As you mentioned, the demonstration against the wall, the boycott of Israeli goods and services, also just living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip under occupation is a struggle, a day-to-day struggle that is some type of nonviolent resistance in the occupation, because ultimately what the Israeli government want the land, and they don't want the people, and that's why they have all that harassment and those pressure on the Palestinian is to make them leave the land. So just for the Palestinian to live there is a type of nonviolent resistance. Unfortunately, in the news here, we don't see any of that until there is a rocket fired from Gaza, and then that's when they start pointing fingers and saying, look, the Palestinians are the instigator and they're the one. But they forget to mention the whole background of the conflict, the refugees, the occupation. You have people living in refugee camps for more than 66 years. You have people under harsh, tough military occupation for more than 45 years. You have the Gaza Strip have been under siege, as you said, really suffocating siege for more than 8 years. And all what we hear about is that homemade rocket that in the last actually, since it was the first rocket lobbed from Gaza Strip, totally killed maybe 13 or 14 Israelis. So it's unfortunate, but it seems like the only thing that we hear about here is the violent resistance of the Palestinians, but we never hear about the daily struggle of the Palestinian to live in their land.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're hoping to do with this show, is that we can explain a little bit about what is going on the ground. And we'll talk more about BDS later when we get to the what can we do part of our show. But so the 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped. They were eventually found murdered, and it's my understanding that that they found that it was a rogue family. I don't know too much about this, but that it wasn't really officially Hamas. Hamas didn't know that it was going to happen. The Hamas leadership didn't know it was going to happen, didn't sanction it, and it was done by a rogue family.
Yeah, none of the Palestinian factions claimed responsibility
Right.
for killing those 3 Israeli soldiers. It's widely believed now that it's a criminal thing, but who's responsible for it exactly? It's unknown.
Yeah.
But Netanyahu's government were so happy and found an excuse to use this to basically devastate Gaza again.
Right. And so then they started dropping bombs on Gaza because they said they wanted to, their initiative was because they wanted to destroy this is something we haven't really talked about, but they said they wanted to destroy the tunnels. And there are, just so we can explain it to our audience, were tunnels between Gaza and Israel, between Gaza and Egypt. For what purpose?
Well, the tunnels between Gaza and Egypt is mainly to get in the goods and services that they're blocked by the blockade. And if you see the list of things that they are prohibited from getting into Gaza, it's ridiculous. Chocolate. You have a type of herbal teas, pens and papers for school kids.
Certainly building materials are blocked.
Building materials are blocked. So and I, as you know, I have family living in Gaza Strip, and when the siege was imposed 6 or 7 years ago, my family telling me that they will go to the supermarket and it would be empty shelves. There was nothing. There's even formula for babies are not available. So that's when the Palestinians are resourceful people, and they refuse to die. So that's when they start digging the tunnels between Gaza Strip into Egypt, and that's where most of the goods are coming, like building materials, as you said, school supplies, medical supplies, anything, food, even gasoline and livestock were coming in through the tunnels.
So they were substantial tunnels, big. People could walk through them. You could lead a cow through them, or different sheep.
Absolutely.
Goats.
Yeah. At the beginning, they were it kind of, as you said, the siege has been in place for 8 years. So it kind of the tunnel trade evolved. The beginning, it was small tunnel that will just get in small things and food mainly, and then evolved to get in livestock, building materials, even some of them cars get in. So this is their airport. This is their seaport.
They don't have a seaport. They don't have an airport.
Right.
They don't have any way of doing business. No other way of doing business with the outside world except through those tunnels.
I actually saw a picture of two bride and being smuggled through the tunnel, coming through the tunnel. Another thing you mentioned the lack of a seaport, and the other thing to talk about is the fact that fishermen aren't even allowed to fish. I mean, that's how they made their living, right? That's how they brought food into the country, was by fishing in the Mediterranean Sea. And now Israel has set it up so that the siege includes, they were only allowed 3 miles out.
2 miles, yeah.
And, you know, they'd overfished it. There weren't any fish left in the 3 miles. And if they went farther out, they were shot by the
Right.
Israeli military.
Yeah, and many fishermen lost their lives.
Yep. Just trying to get
just
food.
make a living for their bring some food for their families and kids. And yeah, like you said, they were only allowed 3 miles or 2 miles, I heard. But now they, after the Israeli aggression and resilience and resistance from Gaza, and after the negotiations in Cairo, they're allowed 6 miles.
Yeah, which is
not
really
much either. So.
Yeah, that's not much either.
And just to bring attention to this is, in international law, fishing is allowed even in international water, not only the regional water for the territory. In my understanding, under international law, I think it's 25 nautical miles is the regional waters, and then after that, the international water. As long as you obey with the international law, you're allowed, the fishermen allowed to, but it just tells you why the siege is in place. How is that fishermen fishing for fish is a security threat to Israel.
Yeah.
So it's just the whole theory.
Well, of course, what Israel claims was going on was that there were being arms smuggled through the tunnels and smuggled in by the sea, and that's why they say they're not letting them go out. So at the beginning, you know, the very, very first few days, what they were doing was bombing what they said was the tunnels. Only instead, they were bombing, you know, houses. In the end, in those 52 days, they bombed, how many? Almost 2,000 people lost their lives, 500 of them children. That they bombed UN schools, they bombed hospitals, they bombed, of course, lots of houses. You know, people are how many? I don't know what the current figures are on how many were displaced. Do you?
There's about between 400,000 to 500,000 that they were right after the war ended. They were displaced and living either in UN schools or living with other peoples or living in tents. I think that figure is kind of, now it's dwindling down, but it's still, there's significant people that they're still living in schools, which schools started this week in Gaza, and those people now are homeless because the schools had evicted them effectively last week to start the school year, and still the siege is in place. There's no building materials are coming in to rebuild some of those houses, especially building maybe there's 20,000, more than 20,000 the houses that have been demolished, but at least the Palestinians want to kind of fix some of the houses that they're partially damaged, to have those people can go back to their homes, but there is still no easing of the sanction, no signs of letting any of those materials in for people to be able to fix their homes and going back to their homes, basically.
As you mentioned, you have family there. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened to your family?
I guess it's not only my family that is affected, everybody affected, and you said the Israeli discriminant bombing of the Gaza Strip did not actually stop at what they said that their target is, which is dismantling what they call the terror tunnels and the rocket launchers. They basically were demolishing homes on top of their occupants, and those homes, they don't have anything to do with rockets or tunnels or resistance. And I'm saying resistant occupation is allowed by international law. But even though I have family members that have been killed, actually 5 cousins that have been killed in one house, that a F-16 bombed the whole house on top of them, and those people did not have anything to do with resistance. They did not have anything to do with rockets, and there was nothing going on around that area at that time, or any time. So it's just that tells you how much is the war about tunnels, or about Hamas, or about the rockets, and more about it's just subjugating the Palestinian people to the mighty power of the Israeli forces, to make sure that they accept the status quo and stop the resistance. And in another incident, a whole family, my cousin, his kids and his mom, they were in a taxi cab, and that taxi cab was targeted by a drone, and that missile killed 2 of his kids, a 22 years old and a 10 years old. His mom, 85 years old, my great aunt, and maimed, and she's still in the hospital. His daughter, 7 months pregnant daughter. So my question is, how is that justified? A taxi cab that's driving, there is nothing going on. Nobody. It's a family. It's a whole family that has been targeted. It just, how can anybody justify it? And unfortunately, we hear our government here and the Congress reiterate the support for Israeli to defend themselves. But then how about the Palestinians? Who is defending the Palestinian rights? Who is defending the Palestinian civilians? It just, this needs to change, and people need to speak up about those atrocities, because if it doesn't matter if those are Palestinians or Israelis or any other nationalities, those are civilians, and we need to stand up for human rights. And because if we exclude the Palestinian from being humans, the next step is we're going to exclude somebody else, and it's going to come to our doorsteps here, that people will exclude other peoples from being humans and justify their oppression, like as we've seen in Ferguson here. Is just the connection is uncanny, that you see a whole military police coming into a town to quell a nonviolent resistance of the oppression of the people, and just the people speaking up against the violence and non-justified violence against a civilian, that he was shot dead, and the excuse was that he stole a cigarette pack or something from a grocery store, and just they're making excuses for this violence the same way that the Israelis are making excuses that Hamas is using the schools and houses to launch rockets into Israel, which Israel yet to prove those claims. And then you have the same thing in Ferguson, when they said that teenager stole the cigarettes from the store. And even there was reports, and none of the major media outlet picked that reports, that actually the store owner came out and said that teenager actually paid for the cigarettes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. This same aggression is going on around the world. And as you pointed out, that even after the negotiations, that Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, because the Israelis said they would release the siege, or lift it a little bit. They would let some goods come and go, and as you pointed out, nothing's happening. Now, I did read this morning, and neither of you said you'd seen it yet, but I did read this morning that yesterday Abbas announced an economic agreement with the Israeli government about that they said that they would, if Fatah was allowed by Hamas to serve as a part of the unity government, and we were talking about that earlier, that the unity government is pretty much what did you call it?
It's a technocrat.
Yeah, and which means?
It means people of technical backgrounds, not any political affiliations, being in charge of the ministries and taking care of people's everyday needs.
So if we can get that happening, then apparently Israel has agreed that they will open the borders, and there you will see goods coming in and out of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank at will. Now, we have yet to see exactly what that's going to happen.
We're used to making agreements with Israel and signing big peace accords and agreements with them, and they never fulfill their agreements.
And
that's
one
part
of the things
frustration.
Probably worth mentioning here that the technocrat government, it was in place before the aggression against Gaza, and a lot of analysts are seeing that the actual aggression of Gaza is to actually sabotage the unity government and the reconcile between the Palestinian factions. Because Israel was claiming before that the peace process is failing because the PA or the Palestinian Authority are not talking in the voice of all Palestinians, because you have Gaza Strip is being controlled by Hamas, and you have a separate government in Gaza than the West Bank. So now the Israelis have no excuse when there is a unity government that talks for all Palestinians. So the manufacturing of the settler killing by Hamas, and then the rampage into the West Bank, and then the drawing the response from Hamas is all. It was all a plan to sabotage the unity government, so the Israelis will still have the Israeli government will still have the excuse that we cannot negotiate with the Palestinian because there is no one voice for the Palestinians.
So maybe now what we'll see is they will provoke an incident happening so that Fatah and Hamas will get into an argument again or something. I don't know. We'll see what'll happen with that, because I agree. I don't think that.
But I mean, after this war, I don't think Israel is interested in any more wars with Gaza.
Really?
Because the last one, I think Israel will think twice before they bomb Gaza this time, or this
so what
next
do you see
time
happening?
around. Because one of the biggest results out of this war is, of course, the devastation and killing all these civilians. It exposed Israel's true image, and Israel is exposed. It's no longer the victim in the eyes of the world. People saw on the social media, they saw the pictures, they saw the bodies of the killed children, women, and the devastation that happened. And I think Israel will think twice this time before they go into Gaza.
I hope you're right.
And they really faced very strong resistance too when they did the ground invasion. So they lost a lot of their soldiers too.
Yeah,
hopefully,
68.
Yeah, some 60, 70 of their soldiers. And we have to also mention that most of the Israeli casualties they're all, maybe 95% of them, they're all soldiers, versus the Palestinians, which is mostly civilians.
Yeah, the UN says 70% were civilians.
On the Palestinian
some
side.
estimates are 77. And the reason there's such a discrepancy, to explain it a little bit to the audience, is that of course, the Israelis, they say 50%. And I'm saying even if it was 50%, isn't that a huge price to pay? But there's a discrepancy because of the way, partially because of the way they name militants. And one of the things that Israel does, for example, is Israel will call any male between the ages of 10 and 85
As a militant.
militant. And so they name those militants, whether they've ever
So
had
in their
anything
eyes,
to do
there
with
is
it.
no such Palestinian male that's a civilian.
Right.
They're all militants.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons there's such a discrepancy. And also with so many being killed, it's really hard to track down exactly who it was that was killed for, but the UN apparently, from what I'm reading, actually has people on the ground. So they're, going down and tracking down every single thing. So I guess I personally would believe the UN certainly more than the Israeli
Actually,
government.
the Israeli government, by their admission during the war, when the total casualty, the death was 1,100, they had said that they have killed 240 militants, so that puts the figure at 80%
Yeah.
civilians. So,
Of course, since then they've changed their minds.
yeah, but the truth will come out, but then they will change it. But eventually, the figures are much higher, civilians casualties or death than what even the UN is saying, because as you said. Some of the things that they also categorize as a militant is civil servants, like the police and or anybody that's associated with Hamas government. They lob them into being Hamas operatives. But you have, as I said, you have 1.8 million people living in the Gaza Strip, and they will have civil servants that they need to take care of the day-to-day lives of the people that they live there, but then all those are considered terrorists, and they're considered militant by the Israeli standard.
Yeah, and I just got the word that now we're under 10 minutes, so we need. It doesn't look like we're going to get to ISIS and ISIL. Maybe we'll have to do a whole other show about that, which is okay because our Syrian didn't make it today, and maybe we can do another show with him. But let's talk just a few minutes about BDS. You mentioned it before, and boycott. You mentioned is one of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And one of the things that's happening is that there's a boycott against Israeli scholars. That they're asking, and what is it? In some group in the American study, social study, I think. I can't remember exactly what it is, but some American intellectual group or academic group has said that they will not exchange with Israel, and so that's one step that's happening in the United States. Another thing that happened in the United States is that the Presbyterian Church divested some funds from Hewlett-Packard and Motorola and Caterpillar. And actually I happen to know, because I'm working on it myself, the Methodists are looking at the same thing happening when their conference goes forward. It's not until 2016, but we need to get a start on it. So we're working on it. We're going to have a workshop about it here coming up. And so the Methodists are also working on it. In Europe, they're working on a lot harder. The EU, the European Union, has said that they will not work with any group, any company that has any business in the West Bank settlements. And my understanding is that they're really doing it. And I also heard the other day, and I don't know if you guys have heard it or not, but that SodaStream is talking about pulling out of the West Bank. So if that happens, that's a huge victory. They haven't actually done it yet, but I understand they're planning to. So those kinds of things are going on in terms of...
One other thing we noticed, Pat, you probably noticed too, is in the U.S. there are a lot of Jews who are standing up for justice for Palestine, and they're disassociating themselves from Israel and the crimes that Israel is committing.
Yeah.
And that's really, in my opinion, this will take a lot of... will have a big impact on Israel.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right.
we're excited about that.
You
and we
see a lot
commend
more.
the Jewish, those Jews standing for justice for Palestine.
Yeah,
It's one thing, but-
there's a lot more. There's Jewish Voices for Peace, of
Yeah.
course, and but yeah, you're right. A lot more people are taking a second look at exactly what's happening in Israel, and many of them are saying that what's happening in Israel today is not according to Jewish
represent
tradition.
Jews, yeah.
And even there is a Jewish organization within Israel that they are trying to, the Israeli government they put really a kind of restriction on information that's coming out from the Gaza Strip after the last war, and there is a lot of human rights organization within Israel, Jewish organization like Beit Salem and another organization that they're trying to bring the truth out and kind of educate the Israeli population about what the Israeli army is doing, because a lot of those information are not available to the Israelis. And that's one of the reasons that you probably see high support of the Israeli citizen to what the Israeli government is doing, is because they don't have the full truth. So that's something that is really important, that to point out that we have those human rights groups, Jewish human rights groups working within Israel,
Right.
to bring the truth out.
Right. Beit Salem is one, Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions, and Jeff Halper will be in Iowa City shortly. And the Combatants for Peace, and
Gush Shalom.
yeah. I can't pronounce that one, but yeah. And there are several Israeli groups who are working with the Palestinians to get the word out about what the Palestinians have been talking about, going to the International Criminal Court to see about war crimes that have been committed against Palestine. It's my understanding that Abbas has stopped that for the time being, but it's possible that he did that because of this economic agreement. And yeah, I mean, we'll need to see in the coming days what will come of that. Let me mention, and I know we can still talk and talk, but let me mention before our time is up, I got our 5-minute warning, that we will be having a fundraiser for Gaza, a group called People for Justice in Palestine. This also being sponsored by Veterans for Peace, the what is the University of Iowa
Human Rights
Center, and co-sponsored by a large number of churches, the Mennonites, the
Friends Committee.
Yeah, the American Friends Service Committee, and several other groups. And we will be holding a dinner, a fundraiser on September 26th from 6 to 8 at Old Brick in Iowa City. And please come, you're all welcome. And that's one of the things we can do. And we can also, get the word out. IowaPJP.org, sorry. IowaPJP.org will have current information on all kinds of different events that are coming up. And they also meet the first and third Tuesdays at the mall downtown Iowa City at 6 o'clock, 6:30. 6:30.
The food court.
Yeah, near the food court. And there are sanctions going on. Now we'll switch gears a little bit, talk more about boycott, divestments, and sanctions. And one of the things I would like to see personally is, like you said, one of the agreements when they finished this round is that there wouldn't be any more confiscation of lands. They wouldn't expand settlements at this time. And just yesterday or the day before, they announced they're going to 1,000 more acres of land. And it's just like, I don't understand what's going on. Well, we just got the 1-minute warning, so I wanted to be sure to thank you guys for coming on, and I hope we'll be seeing more of you in the coming days as we continue to discuss this very important issue. And maybe both of you, or at least one of you, will come back, and we will get a chance to talk about ISIS and ISIL in the future. And thank you for
Yeah.
coming on.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you.
for having
Appreciate it,
us.
Pat.
Thank you.